right. Hear ye, hear ye. We are here to for the regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission, October 11th, 2021. First thing we're going to do is do the Pledge of Allegiance, so please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Once bad when you mess that up on
I've been known to do that before.
Oh, send you back to school. All right, and item number 3 is our work sessions, the presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding future work sessions and an educational series related to principles and best practices of municipal planning. How long did it take you to write that sentence?
Not long enough. Elena.
You crammed it all in one sentence. It's impressive.
Elena Helton, City Planner. So as you know, at our last meeting in September, we presented a list of planning topics for consideration of the Commission to be included in the future educational series for Planning and Zoning Commission work sessions. Afterwards, we sent you a list of those topics and a copy of the PowerPoint presentation and asked you to give us a list of topics that you were interested in based on that presentation. And then in that email, we also made a recommendation to strategize the order of those work sessions to coordinate with our comprehensive plan and downtown plan process that's about to be underway. And so we're just going to go over the initial topics that we presented at the last meeting as like a recap. And then we'll talk about the upcoming projects, including the comp plan and downtown plan and the elements that are going to be in those and how those relate to some of those planning topics that we talked about last time and the timeline. And then we'll ask for some direction from the Planning and Zoning Commission on on a proposed schedule that we've included in the presentation. So at the September meeting, we gave you just kind of a broad list of categories to choose from, including comprehensive planning, community engagement, downtown planning, historic preservation, economic development, transportation and mobility, housing, and then some topics that are more recent trends versus best practices. So smart growth, sustainable development, climate change, context-sensitive solutions, and hazard planning. So the email that we sent you following that included about 50, in more detail, very specific topics. And so we won't go over those again. But the idea is, based on the comprehensive plan update and the downtown plan, we would like to coordinate the subjects with the timeline. And so we'll go over that. So the comprehensive plan update, that's going to be about a 12 to 16-month process. The elements that are within that plan include a visioning process, and so getting feedback from the community to establish an overall vision for the city, how we should grow over time, examining our current conditions, including our current economic market, census data, demographics, housing patterns, things of that nature, establishing goals, long-range goals and objectives, providing implementation strategies, so an action plan to implement those goals and objectives. And then the different plan elements are going to include future land use, transportation, infrastructure and facilities, including community facilities and parks and things of that nature, and then neighborhood and historic preservation. The comprehensive plan will also include an in-depth study of our I-69 corridor, including an analysis of infrastructure and land uses, and how we can better prepare for that development. And it'll also include a housing needs assessment. So looking at our current housing stock, and then doing a market analysis and projecting our needs into the future and identifying those gaps so we can figure out which housing types or housing products we should be incentivizing and how we can fill those gaps as we move forward. The downtown plan is going to take place at the same time the comp plan is, but that's going to be a shortened process, about 7 to 9 months, and it creates a vision for the downtown. It also reviews and provides recommendations for updates to downtown facades, streetscapes, mobility, access, parking, and amenities, and it will also include a more detailed economic market analysis, looking at the current stock and demand for office, retail, housing, and the strategies for business recruitment, and then how to better support our current businesses and how we can better create projects to catalyze some of that development as far as having city participation or city intervention. And so when you look on the right, this is the actual tasks that have been included in the overall project. And so you have project management, pre-planning, public participation, which is really a project-long process, the comprehensive plan elements, downtown master plan, I-69, the overall implementation, which really is going to coordinate all of those plans together, and then the report writing and presentations. And so we prepared some just preliminary timeline and schedule of topics that we think would work well as far as trying to correspond with those upcoming studies, as far as the different topics and, you know, where that project will be or what phase that project will be in. So the highlighted yellow text actually corresponds with the comp plan and downtown plan timeline to date. And so the idea is that next meeting in November would be an overview of comprehensive planning and community visioning. In December, we would talk about go into more detail as far as community engagement and meeting facilitation, and talk about scenario planning, which is going to be an element of the downtown plan. And then in January, we would do a deeper dive into downtown planning specifically, including revitalization and historic preservation strategies. And then going down, you have neighborhood planning and measuring community character. So part of the comprehensive plan and downtown plan would be looking at our neighborhoods and strategies to preserve and protect our neighborhoods, as far as identifying ways to blend those neighborhoods together. So creating some context-sensitive development and some transition zones. Then we'll take a look at economic development and planning, because they go hand in hand. And then land use and fiscal balance. So creating a land use plan that creates some fiscal solvency for the city and helps us move towards our economic development strategies. And then transportation and mobility, which will tie into the I-69 corridor plan. And then the housing needs assessment, which really will be just an overview of where we're at and then where we need to be. And then the neighborhood revitalization, which will also address residential infill, and then plan implementation. So whenever we look at this timeline and the highlighted text in yellow, this is just a broad overview of that timeline just on a month-to-month basis. So you see that the project management and pre-planning, that really is the entire process. And the public participation is too. And so the idea is in November, that's when we really kick off the public participation, but public participation will be a part of an ongoing strategy. And so we'll have some really like heavy visioning processes in the very beginning, but then we'll continue to have updates and meetings and surveys, and we'll have those touch points and follow up to make sure that that feedback that we heard in the initial visioning process, we're still following that, and that's still being included in the process as we move along. And then as you go down, you have comprehensive plan, again, downtown, future I-69, overall implementation, and report writing. And so just to break this down further, the public participation plan right now is scheduled to really kick off in November. And so that November 1st presentation about a comprehensive plan and visioning, that is intended to correspond with that two-day visioning. So the idea is we would have that orientation and work session the month before. So that would give the Planning and Zoning Commission and anyone who wanted to attend those meetings a good overview of kind of what that process looks like before we actually get into the process. And the same thing with that second meeting in December with the two-day visioning. That's going to actually be a month before that's planned to take place with the comprehensive plan. And so we've just tried to coordinate those with the project timeline. So we're actually talking about the topic before we're actually doing the topic, if that makes sense. And this is just the additional tasks. So right now, it's the overall implementation and action steps are supposed to take place during July, August of 2022, and we've scheduled those work sessions to correspond a month ahead of time. So you guys are getting information from staff before you're actually getting the results from the consultant. And so that concludes staff's presentation. So this is just a preliminary timeline. We'd love to get your feedback. Do you guys think that this is a good strategy moving forward? And then, of course, this could be an ongoing thing. And so after the comprehensive plan is done, or after we've gone through these subjects, we could talk about short-term rentals and student housing, and go into much more detail about some of those other issues that not only Nacogdoches, but other college communities of our size and character struggle with on a day-to-day basis. And so with that, I'll conclude our presentation and take any questions or feedback from the commission. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to make sure on this one, the last one, where it's highlighted for plan implementation, that is 2022, right?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay, just making sure.
That was an error. Thank you for
Okay.
pointing that out.
Yeah.
We'll correct that.
Okay. I feel like this is definitely good steps You know, it does go hand in hand with economic development. Overall, in terms of what we responded with, what were we most concerned about?
So, and actually, I didn't get feedback from all of the commissioners, but some of the primary ones were community engagement, you know, comprehensive planning, visioning, economic development, transportation, housing, some of those broader categories. And so all of those topics will be addressed with the comprehensive plan process. And we'll actually be having multiple conversations about those different things within the community. And so I think this will really feed off of that and just help support those other conversations that we're already having in the community and give you guys tools. So when you're going out and talking about it, you have some, you're equipped with additional information so that you can share with your colleagues, with your networks, and at these different engagement meetings that we're going to have. So, but yes, housing, transportation, economic development, neighborhood preservation, those were kind of the four major topics that came out. And I would still like some feedback, so if you guys go back and you decide, well, actually, I think, you know, based on the list that you provided, I think I'd like to talk about this first, just let us know. It's an ongoing process, but this is kind of our first crack at it.
How is community feedback tracked and shared with the decision makers or the planning process?
Yeah, there's different ways to do that. There will actually be a public engagement plan that's drafted by the consultant once we actually initiate the process. So when we present, October 19th, we'll actually present the contract to City Council, and it'll include the plan elements, the full scope of services, timeline, and schedule of fees. And within that, they have proposed some preliminary meetings and date and times, but we won't have a full-fledged engagement plan until we actually get started, initiate that process. So that plan will actually have very specific policies and procedures for how information is collected, how it's distributed, where it's stored, who has access to it, when we share it, how we share it. And so right now, we're actually planning on having a dedicated website that'll be hosted by the consultant, and it'll have a way for people to continuously give feedback. So we'll have surveys, we'll have an option for you to sign up for meetings, we'll have an area for you to ask questions, and all of that feedback will be gathered and then stored on that public website so that anyone can access it at any time. And so the idea is it's a 24-hour website that's constantly gathering and streaming information, but we don't have all the details of that just yet.
If I may speak to that too, they did suggest that a lot of them were going to be using cell phones essentially to gather data for them to take surveys, and that was a concern for the public. But I did see that there's going to be an actual physical space for them to actually come and collect data as well.
Yeah, so just taking a look at some of the, so of the public participation, we have meetings, so those include in-person public meetings, general public meetings, focus group meetings, meetings with the steering committees, and then one-on-one interviews. And then the man on the street engagement, those are actually where we're going to be going to people where they already are. So we're going to be going to events that are already scheduled, whether it's a football game, whether it's the farmer's market, whether it's a school function, soccer practice. And so going out and collecting feedback from people where they're already spending their time at the grocery store, things like that. Maybe it's neighborhood walk shop. The surveys are going to be online. And so the idea is we'll have kind of one-off topic surveys, and then we'll have more in-depth surveys based on where we're at in that process. The two-day comprehensive visioning, that's actually going to be a two-day process where the consultant is going to be in town, and so we're going to have a public meeting where it'll be open to anyone who wants to attend. It'll kind of be like a walking workshop where we'll have areas for people to come and talk about specific things. We'll have an open presentation and maybe break into small groups for people who want to talk about different specific topics. And then part of that process will be additional focus groups and interviews. And then that second day will be a visioning process where we'll talk about all the input that we got the day before, and then with that coordinate some detailed actually visioning where we're looking at what's our vision for the 2003 comprehensive plan based on the feedback. How has that changed, or should we take what we already have forward, or do we want to include that feedback? And so that's that visioning process. And then the 2-day downtown design charrette will actually include a workshop of downtown with a consultant and the steering committee. And then it'll include a design charrette where they'll actually come in with drawings and renderings, and we'll actually kind of go through a design workshop where we'll be drawing and marking and kind of going through that creative process. And then the 2-day down, and then 2.7, volunteers, citizen committees, and SFA interns. That's kind of a catch-all because we really want to, really want to take advantage of our civic groups, our volunteers at SFA, citizen committees. We want this to be a citizen-driven process. And so the idea is there's already a lot of civic groups out there that meet regularly, that already do community engagement, they're already plugged into those networks. Let's utilize them and have them facilitate some of those workshops themselves, and us just be there as a resource to provide tools for that. And then updates and progress reports. So we'll be making regular updates to the commission, to city council, to different groups, just letting the community know about where we're at, what's going on, and then the next step. So there will be a continuous feedback loop of sharing and gathering information.
Have the committees already been formed?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Committee, they have the
There's a master plan.
civilian,
They've suggested during a city meeting, basically, who would potentially be on these committees. Commissioner Deppish from P&Z would probably be on the comprehensive one, which is great. Good job, Ken. And, but yeah, it's still being formulated, I guess. And do you know when that's going to be decided upon?
Yeah. Sorry, excuse me. It'll probably be at a November city council meeting.
Okay.
And so, and in the actual scope of the project, we've included steering committee meetings, one for the downtown, one for the comprehensive plan. And the idea is that those committees are comprised of council and board members, but also just resident. So you could be a property owner, you could be a business owner, you could just be a neighbor. And so the idea is these aren't really, the kind of at-large groups aren't really restricted to an occupation or a sector of the city, and there is an application process, but we are striving to get some good representation. So we'd like some representation from SFA, from the ISD, from the chamber, to make sure that we're kind of like checking off all those boxes and getting that broad representation, and those people can actually go out to their networks and facilitate additional community engagement. But no, we haven't identified specific people who are going to be in those groups or created any kind of rules or regulations. It's just kind of a preliminary discussion right now.
Sure. Okay.
so there's no rules around how you select either.
Yeah, so we, at the last city council work session where we talked about this, we actually proposed some kind of, some ground rules. And so the idea is these steering committee members will be responsible for helping participate in that public engagement process. They'll be facilitators. They'll be connecting us to those people that we don't have contact with. They'll actually be facilitating meetings. They'll be champions of the process. They're expected to commit a certain amount of time. So there will be regular steering committee meetings, but there will also be an expectation that you attend other non-steering committee public engagement meetings. And so those are just kind of some preliminary ground rules and expectations that we presented to council. Like, these are kind of our expectations of time commitment, responsibilities, and things of that nature. But we haven't prepared like a formal rules or procedures or anything. I imagine that will come at the meeting after the contract is adopted.
Mm-hmm. And the consultant did say that they want people that are actively involved within the city and that have a large outreach so that they can be part of this whole committee. So.
Yeah, and the idea is if you have a council and board members on those commissions, then as they're attending their regular meetings, they can kind of report back and let them know, hey, this is what's going on. This is what we talked about at the meeting. So when we get to the final phase, then it's not a surprise to everyone about what was discussed, where we're at, how we got to where we are. So it's creating additional feedback loops and touch points.
Forgive me,
Yeah.
who's managing the RFP process? Who has managed it with this?
Me.
You have?
Yes.
Okay. So you built the RFP, submitted it out?
Yes. Now, we did have a committee who helped review those and edit them and make sure that we included everything that we needed to. And so the evaluation committee included Mario Canizares, his city manager, Larissa Philpott, president of NEDCO, Mikhail, or Dr. K, who's the chair of the Economic Development Department at SFA, Steve Bartlett, city engineer, and who am I missing? Well, and me, but I didn't actually review or score any of the submittals. I facilitated, I helped write the RFPs, we coordinated everything, but we weren't actually scoring or rating any of those respondents.
Did anybody have relationships with them before, this group before the RFP?
With the consultant for DTJ, so DTJ has two sub-consultants. One of them is KSA. They're a local engineering firm. They do a lot of work with the city. And then 215 is another local engineer who's probably worked on every major commercial development that you've seen in town. And so we do have a working relationship with those two, which is, I think, one of the strategies was to have a local presence and someone with some background information to help make the process more seamless.
At the prime?
Oh, the prime, no.
Nobody's. Just, there's questions that are
Yeah.
coming up in the community, and I just want to be able to answer them. So
Yeah, I had actually never heard of DTJ until they submitted.
they submitted.
Now, there was one respondent who submitted that actually did our land use fiscal analysis for us last year. And so Verdunity actually conducted that land use fiscal analysis, and they submitted a response to our RFQs, but they weren't the finalist.
Can you go back to there you go.
Yeah.
Faster than I am. I like the idea of tailoring this to the comprehensive plan and the sub-plans that are going to be underneath that. I think it just makes sense right now. Like, we weren't in the process of doing that. I think we could probably talk about residential zoning or when it's appropriate to change to higher density zoning.
Yeah, and so I do have this slide kind of tucked away. These are some of the broader topics. So if we weren't going through a comprehensive plan process right now or a downtown plan process, I would want to do like a planning 101 first, and then maybe talk about historic preservation, residential infill, short-term rentals, food trucks, some of the things that we deal with on a daily basis, and things that we're looking at actually like amending our zoning ordinance for, student housing. So I think the order would definitely be different, but I think because of what we're doing, we just want to make sure that we introduce those topics first, and then once that's done, then there's, we can move forward with whatever order you guys like. I think if it were me and we weren't doing any other processes, my first one would probably be economic development, historic preservation, residential neighborhood preservation and infill, probably student housing and short-term rentals, signs and food trucks, and then maybe infrastructure and drainage, and then we would just go from there. So, and sometimes there's things that are just going on in statewide or nationwide that are relative to these, and so things that may be going on at the Capitol or things going on in Washington, D.C. that affect planning, and then we would just update or adjust the schedule based on kind of what's going on in the community or in the media. Planning and broadband, that's kind of a new thing that's emerged this year, especially with COVID-19 kind of highlighting the lack of broadband infrastructure. And so that's definitely something that we want to bring forward sooner rather than later.
Is that me? I think so.
Yeah, and as far as the amount of time you think you're going to need for each of these sessions, what, I know it's going to vary from week to week, but what do you think is a target on how long you might take for each of these?
So for just a general discussion, I would want to have at least 30 minutes, just because we want to go over, hey, here's kind of generally an overview of this topic, and then talk about how that relates to Nacogdoches or how that relates to Texas, or how that relates to the process that we're going through right now. And then, we could start these work sessions early. So, at City Council, their regular meeting starts at 5:30, but if they have a work session, they may start at 4:30 or 4. So that way they're not here till 8 o'clock, what have you. So depending on the topic, we could have these meetings earlier. It's not required. We don't have anything in our policies and procedures that say you have to have a work session early. As long as we start our regular meeting at 5, and so we can have a work session earlier than that. And so that's really just the preference of the commission. We can also talk about having multiple meetings in a month, and I think that's something that we'll bring back at the next meeting, just to talk about, hey, do we want to add meetings? Do we want to have one dedicated workshop meeting where we don't have anything else and we cover multiple topics? And so that's definitely something that we can explore, because, again, we don't have anything that says that we only shall meet the second Monday of every month. That's just our standard regular. We can add meetings, we can start earlier. So our schedule is pretty flexible. And I think maybe the first 2, we'll just kind of see how it goes. And then if we see that they're running long, or we see that we want to add more, then we can make adjustments.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, but I mean, we should kind of assess, and, we can look at what the rest of the agenda is for that week and see if it makes sense to start early or maybe separate, do a special, I don't know, it's really not a special meeting, just a second meeting.
Yeah.
In a given month,
Yeah, I agree.
if the agenda's too busy.
So, and I was actually talking about that with Lily earlier. So our last meeting was really full, and we tried to, put a lot in that meeting. Sometimes we're limited by when we receive applications. So the idea is, depending on whenever you submit, you can go to a certain meeting, and because people don't want to wait an entire month to go to another meeting, we try to work with them and get them on the next agenda as quickly as we can. And of course, we're limited by legal ads and things like that. But in the future, we are looking at changing some of those deadlines for certain applications, like planned development districts and specific use permits, to give staff more time to review those, and build in some additional extended timeframes specifically for those applications. So that way, we're not trying to fit as many things. Another thing that, again, I was talking to Lily earlier, is because we only have one meeting a month, it kind of restricts us to what things go to what meeting. And so with City Council, they meet twice, and so if we were interested, we could look at incorporating more of those, and that would give us more flexibility to schedule things, so that way we're not just packing everything into a single meeting. And so those are definitely things that we're looking at, and I think we'll bring that back next time and talk to you guys and give you some examples of some projects where, in order to, not be delayed an entire month for their project, we kind of had to bend over backwards and make things happen. And so whenever you do that, it's good customer service, but it can create some undue stress, create unnecessary errors. And so we want to make sure that as we're getting busier and we're getting more applications and we're seeing more development, we're maintaining the same level of customer service and the same quality. And so just managing that process and making sure that we're not losing any kind of quality in the meantime.
Yeah. My concern would be missing things, things slipping through the cracks because you're trying to go too fast.
Yeah, and so I think in the past, we haven't been as busy, and so it was never an issue. And we've gotten busier, but our staff hasn't changed. And so just trying to look at our processes and be more efficient, and some of that is just building in longer timelines. And so we'll be bringing that back as well.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay.
I do realize we're getting busier and busier, and then with this overall master plan for downtown and for comprehensive planning, I can't foresee this slowing down.
No. And I think we did see there was a lot of buildup from being closed, and people were just waiting, just holding on projects. And so once things opened back up, we really saw a large influx of things. And so I think it's a combination of that. But even year over year, we've seen a steady increase. It's been small and incremental, but it has been steady. And then this year, we really just saw a big jump. And so just making adjustments, and we'll bring that forward next month for a discussion.
Okay.
So as far as direction, we'd like to move forward with what's shown here, if everyone is amenable to that.
I am.
I am as well.
Yeah, I don't think we need to vote on it or anything.
No.
But we can just
No.
give you our feedback. I think I think it's a great starting point.
Okay.
And knowing we can flex if we need to, because there may be changes to the timeline for the overall plan, or there may be issues that pop up that we need to address.
And for these, we'll send you the PowerPoint ahead of time.
Yeah.
So you guys can have those slides, and so it'll help you prepare questions and things like that. And so that will be something that we'll be actually adding to the packet and we'll be publishing online, the actual PowerPoint presentation itself.
Yeah, I'd be interested in publicizing at least the first couple of these, maybe to the public at large, and inviting people.
Yes, so we plan on putting it in our newsletter, we're gonna put it in our Friday update, and then we're also gonna be putting it on our Facebook and social media. So the Friday update is that letter that gets sent out to the council, but also gets sent out to our local media group. And so the newspapers, KTRE, and that's just like general information about what the city's doing, what different departments are doing, events or activities. And then, of course, our Facebook, that's just live. And then, so we'll make sure that we put this out there well in advance.
Okay.
Yes, because the original intent was to help the public understand just as much as us
Yes,
how this all works.
Thank you.
Yeah.
you.
This is good.
Thank you.
And, yeah. We're ready for the next agenda item.
All right. Next agenda item is open forum. There's no members of the public. Well, technically you're a member of the public.
Well,
Did you want to introduce?
Yes,
your-
yes, I would like to, thank you. I'm going to do that in the beginning, and then I was going to wait till the end of the agenda. So this is Mckenzie Rogers. She is our planning and zoning intern. She recently graduated with her bachelor's degree in English linguistics in May of this year, and she's currently attending graduate school at SFA, pursuing a master's in public administration. And so she'll be with us for a while, helping us do some research, looking at our policies and procedures, and then helping us as we go through that comprehensive and downtown plan process. So you'll be seeing more of her. You may be getting some correspondence from her, and we are thrilled to have her.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. But otherwise, I think we can close the open forum.
Okay.
And then moving on to consent agenda, the only item on here is the approval of the minutes. Did anybody, I'm sure everyone had a chance to look over them. Anybody have any edits or changes to the minutes? Or anybody want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion and it's been seconded by Mr. Mills. All those in favor of approving the minutes? Well, first of all, any edits, nothing? Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. All right, minutes are approved. Moving on to the regular agenda. Nothing for A, so we're going to move straight down to the public hearing for B, which is the ordinance amending Chapter 18 zoning, Article 2, administration, Division 1, generally of the Nacogdoches, City of Nacogdoches, Texas Code of Ordinances, providing a severability clause, a repeal clause, and an effective date.
All right, thank you. So in September, we brought forward 2 amendments to our zoning ordinance. This item, item 6C, where we were looking at ways to streamline our processes, and the commission voted to postpone those meetings to this date. And so what we would like to do is bring these back during a work session with the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. So we're going to request that the Planning and Zoning Commission actually not take any action tonight and allow us to do some additional research and then come back again with a work session with P&Z and then City Council before we come back with new red lines and a new ordinance. And then we'll do that for items 6B and 6C.
Okay. I think that's a good idea. I saw your recommendation, and I think it would give us, the more time we take getting those things edited ahead of time, the better, in my opinion.
And normally, we would, any kind of ordinance amendment, we would bring that forward in the form of a work session first. With these, we've been working on them for some time. And so once we realized that, once we had the discussion, we realized that we really weren't ready. And so from now on, we will be bringing those forward in a work session before we advertise for a public hearing.
Okay. just like anytime there's a change to regulations or anything, they have a comment period.
Yeah.
Time for everybody to go, well, wait, what about this? You know, because otherwise you only find out after it's already enacted.
Then it's too
Yeah.
late
And
sometimes.
then you're trying to scramble to fix the situation.
And typically, we would have like an actual public comment period, especially if we have an ordinance that's actually being more restrictive or is punitive in nature. So if we were actually adopting regulations that increased the building setback or required more landscaping or put more burden on a developer, we would most certainly have a kind of above and beyond a public engagement process where we would actually engage the developers directly and get that feedback. With these, because it actually had the effect of the opposite, kind of streamlining and not reducing our standards, but just making it easier. We didn't anticipate that, but looking back now, hindsight's 20/20. We'll always do a work session first.
That's okay. We don't have to take a vote on that, I don't think. We're just gonna not do anything. How about that?
Okay.
And we'll wait until a future, until it's put on a future agenda. Moving on to 7, discussion and possible action on future agenda items. Planning and zoning member may inquire about a subject for which notice has not been given, a statement of specific factual information, or the recitation of existing policy may be given, and any deliberation is limited to a proposal to place the subject on an agenda for a subsequent meeting. So, any comments about future agenda items? We've kind of already done that, I think, so.
Yeah, and just as an update, Ken, on October 19th, we are going to have that city council meeting where we're going to be bringing forward that contract. DTJ will be present, and they'll be there to answer any questions, give a brief presentation. Like I said, at the next meeting, we'll be bringing back a presentation to talk about the potential for adding additional meetings for the Planning and Zoning Commission, looking at extending some of our application deadlines to give staff more time for review, and then just actually, I think that's all. Yeah.
Okay.
One more thing that I did want to ask the commission. So, just as an update, the city council did approve the planned development district for Hetty Leg with the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendations. And Hetty Leg actually, prior to the meeting, agreed to the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendations and actually proposed to extend that existing fence all the way to Mound Street. So it was a small tweak, but actually it was a little bit above and beyond what the commission recommended. And city council approved it unanimously, and so they're very excited to move forward. And I think in future agendas, we'll actually be including a section that is a follow-up to those hearings that you guys heard. So we'll actually be including the results of those city council meetings that are including your recommendations. So you'll see, Hetty Lake Plan Development District approved by council 4-0. So it'll actually be in your packets.
Awesome.
So,
Thank
welcome.
you.
And that's all I have.
Okay, great. No other comments from anyone? All right, we can adjourn.
Thank
It
you.
is, I think it's 6:40. No,
Shortest one I've
5:40.
been-